everyone. Hey, congratulations on your new documentary film, Songs from the Hole.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
I also want to say congratulations to the fact that it's being showcased at South by Southwest. How do you folks feel about that?
Super excited. Super excited, truly.
Honored.
Yeah, it feels like the perfect place for it.
Yeah.
Most excellent. So let me start with Contessa and tell us what sparked you to do this documentary in the first place.
I think what really drew me to 88's story was just how much there was a potential to not only tell an impactful story about all of these themes that I'm very dedicated and committed to telling and speaking about as a storyteller, liberation and faith and family and community, but also that his music was going to be a central part of telling that story. We knew that from the beginning. And so we're actually calling it a documentary visual album. And that's because we used the music that 88 wrote in solitary confinement in the hole, which is where the title of the film comes from. We use that music as a central piece of the narrative and how we told the story of him and his family, and him coming to prison at 15, receiving a double life sentence, and him and his family being on both sides of violent harm and their experience of that and journeying through that, you know, from 15 years old into adulthood. I think that the music really reinforces a lot of the spiritual and emotional themes of the film, and there was no other way to tell the story than to combine the music that he wrote with these more traditional documentary elements that folks might be familiar with, like narration from 88 over the prison phone line and interviews with his family and scenes with them. So I think it was the power of the story itself and the impact that we knew that it could have, and also the possibility for the creative collaboration and what we could do artistically to tell this story in a new way that folks haven't seen before or heard before.
Richie, can you add being a producer on this project on how you wanted the direction with Contessa for the overall documentary?
I was very excited about the form of the film because it seemed like there was no other way to tell it, and at that time we didn't really have a full vision of what it was even going to look like. We had to really like lean into it and learn as we go. All we knew is that we wanted to go back and forth between the narrative fiction that kind of shows 88's internal world to the documentary that tells the overall story, because there's so much story to unpack, and it really requires a film or some kind of medium that encompasses the audience and the story to get it across. And we had met Contessa because she directed The Feminist on Cell Block Y, which 88 and I are both in. She directed that for CNN. And she did such a good job of telling our stories through our words. I've never seen a documentary set in a prison before that only had incarcerated people speaking and telling their own stories, and I really trusted her as a director to center the stories of the characters and the people who are impacted by these systems. And it was 88 we were still in prison at the time when 88 was like, yo, we should ask Contessa if she'll direct it, which sounded like a great idea. And shortly, we had also done another kind of form, like genre bending mini documentary music video with Contessa, with another one of the artists signed to our media cooperative. So we knew that she was perfect for. We didn't ask anybody else. There was no list. It was Contessa, or we're going to direct this ourselves somehow.
88, being this is your story, it's one of those hard stories to actually tell. Could you explain the process of being so open for the story to actually be told onto film, and how did Richie and Contessa actually help you through this journey?
I would say that like being the group that Contessa originally came and shot the CNN documentary about is actually the group that helped me learn to be vulnerable, and be willing to be open and honest, and to do it in a way that was that can be described as fearless, I suppose. And so I don't now, and since that time haven't had difficulty just sharing the most difficult moments of my life. And I think that's a result of just having really faced it and investigated the impact it's had on my life and the impact that it's had on my family. And what Richie and Contessa did as a part of this collaboration, for me, is to like kind of support me and push me in a way artistically and just as a person to be able to share my story in a way that is understandable, because there's a lot of complexities within my story. And like you said, it is a very heavy and hard subject. But nevertheless, I think just the brilliance of these two, they enabled me to really like see how to share this story. And that, coupled with the willingness to be vulnerable that I learned from the self-help group that Richie started in prison, really contributed to how willing I was to tell this story.
88. When you wrote the music for all of this, was the music sort of like a journal of your memories and your experiences through through the system?
Yes, it's the music really is a reflection of not only my experience, but the experience of other incarcerated people, and people impacted by incarceration, and people who have survived very serious violence and harm in our community. The music was it was cathartic. It was a way for me to process what it is that I go through, what it is that many people from my community go through on a daily basis, on a regular basis. So the music was pivotal to me. Being vulnerable, is it's helpful in healing from things like this. And music is one way to be really vulnerable and open. So I utilize that medium to like process a lot of the trauma that I was experiencing at the hands of both incarceration and just the violence and harm that I survived and perpetrated.
Richie, Contessa, can you tell us about the production process of recreating certain scenes through his music and trying to get his music onto, I want to say, to achieve his vision onto screen?
Sure. So we started with the original treatments for each, what we were then calling music videos. I think now we would describe it more as musical fiction because of the way that it's just like interwoven throughout the whole film. But 88's original treatments, and those were sent over, in the mail, snail mail, like handwritten, and we went through those and rewrote them and wrote new pieces and rework them. And then as we were doing that, we're on the phone 15 minutes at a time. And not only just talking about those individual pieces that were going to be, imagined and realized and set to the music, but also me learning about 88's story, story by story by story through childhood into adulthood, meeting with his family and doing interviews with them, and just like having this whole big collection or repertoire of memories, dreams, nightmares, things that people are describing in like really metaphorical ways about what they experienced, and just translating that into something that could work cinematically and represent all of these themes and hold all of these themes in a cinematic way that reinforces the power of the music that 88 and Richie created. It really was like a iterative and generative process as we went, that, you know, the more I was learning, I was like, here's something that someone says, how do we represent that in a visual metaphor and put that in the film, to make sure that what we're hearing and learning on the nonfiction side is really reflected in what we're seeing visually on the musical fiction side, and vice versa. So it was something that we had to figure out as we went a lot of the way.
Most excellent. Well, let me wrap it up with one last question here. As audiences have a chance to view this film, what is the one most important take you hope they walk away with? Anyone?
I think it could be different for all of us. One of the takeaways for me is the humanity of people who are impacted by our justice system, by our criminal legal system. It's often talked about in public. We you know, mass incarceration is a subject that many people talk about, but we kind of talk about it in the abstract. And I think this film puts it in real human terms. These are real people in this film who have real lives and are truly impacted. So my take, what I hope people take away from that is, as we discuss these themes of justice and, you know, what it looks like to find justice in our society, that we keep in mind that we are talking about justice for human beings, all human beings who are involved. That would be my hope.
I think there's all we kind of know is to respond to violence with more violence, whether it be incarceration or other forms of revenge. And the most important takeaway from this film for me is what else is possible. This film shows what else is possible in response to violence.
Excellent. Well, everyone, thank you very much for speaking to us about Songs from the Hole. And I want to say, enjoy South by Southwest.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabe.